I do thank you for joining, and when I had a look at the participants list, I saw a lot of familiar names on there. So thank you for this support. Why I like what Link4 is doing in the space is adopting this concept that invoicing should be simpler and invoicing should happen in a way that is digital and makes efficient business process. Hence my support of this webinar and support of what Link4 and Robin is doing. My role has been on the Digital Business Council on behalf of the Institute of Certified Bookkeepers, on behalf of the bookkeeping community. And the Digital Business Council was formed basically by an initiative of government through the tax office. The tax office, in particular the ABR division, the guys that look after the ABN, sort of had a look at the invoicing environment and said there's got to be a better way to do invoicing electronically throughout the whole Australian economy. And while it's not a tax issue, it is an Australian economy and digital issue. And so the tax office started having some conversations, and then Peter Strong from COSBOA started having conversations. Kate Carnell, who's now the Australian Small Business and Family Enterprise Ombudsman, got involved. And then we got some other associations. We got the big software companies involved. We got the commercial software companies involved, and we got some other government agencies involved, all to say e-invoicing or invoicing can be done better in Australia. So Digital Business Council is a consultative forum. Its members get around and discuss how do we make the digital business economy for Australia better. We then broke into a project, and our first project being e-invoicing, and that first project to try to consolidate the different ways that electronic invoicing is happening in Australia. And the way the Digital Business Council did that was create a series of working groups. I'm the deputy chair of the council itself, but I also chaired the semantic group and was involved in each of the other working groups. As e-invoicing develops, you're going to see a change to the way all our software interacts. And I'm going to just describe to you how I see the world of e-invoicing happen first. And Robin, I'm trusting if I talk too much gobbledygook, you'll interrupt me and tell me to start making sense at some point.
I can certainly do that.
So, and as Robin mentioned, please shoot through any questions at any time for any part of what I'm discussing as we go through. So when I look at what is electronic invoicing today, and the big problem I have with electronic invoicing today is we have hundreds of different formats going on. We have businesses talking to businesses in unique environments. We have different suppliers requiring their own format of an electronic invoice. Many of us do invoicing by sending a PDF. And that is the closest thing we get to in terms of electronic invoicing today. Other businesses might have a client portal. So there is certainly some software that has developed the concept of an electronic invoice by myself issuing you an invoice. Well, I issue you a link. You click on that link, you go to my client portal, and that's the way that you would receive my electronic invoice. Again, I see different models of that. Some of it is delivering a PDF. Some of it is delivering the invoice via a data format. So some are doing it by a direct feed of data. If I look at some of the commercial software out there, if I'm on platform W and you're on platform W, that's software type W, I can send an invoice and it will go straight into your version of the same software. So I've issued the invoice, it's in my debtors ledger, and it's come straight into your software for you to approve. So that's what I mean by a direct feed of my invoice getting into your software. That tends to happen when you are in the same software today. Business 3 in my example here, they might be sending PDFs to some, but they might be logging into their customers portal. So this is not my client portal. This is the fact that I supply to one of the big, say, supermarket chains, either the Coles or the Woolworths. You log into their format, their purchasing portal, and you send through what you have sold them straight into their purchasing area. You can see here what we've got is lots of different ways to deliver an electronic invoice. Now, the person we're sending that to might be, in my example, Business 5. And as you know, when you're receiving invoices, you might have to process those invoices manually. So you've got to key them into your own software. You might be using some software that will read the PDF, so optical character recognition. You might have your own portal. You might have a direct feed. You might have to log into your supplier's portal to receive their invoice. Multiple ways, multiple formats, multiple versions of getting electronic invoicing. And funnily enough, that all takes time to manage. That all takes different systems to be in place. That's not the model going forward. So I start dreaming of, and fortunately others have the same dream, of what could invoicing be going forward into the future. So it doesn't really matter which sort of software I'm using. I want to replace the manual processing of invoices, the OCR reading, the suppliers portal and the direct feeds, and it doesn't matter which software I use. I want another thing to sit in the middle of receiving my invoices. So all of my suppliers might be sending an invoice to me, and they're going to come to what I'll call for a moment a processing hub. And that hub takes their invoice, turns it into data, sends that data to whichever package I'm using, and I'm going to receive that invoice straight into my ledger or into my invoice approval system. Now, the downside of that is each of those businesses might have had different pieces of software. Well, in my dream world, it doesn't matter which software they've got. They generate their invoice in their software. They send it to a little hub. That hub will turn whichever invoice format, whichever set of data, into a standard set of data. That standard data will be sent to my hub, and my hub will now put it into the software that I'm using for me to receive it. So I've used the word standard a couple of times there. E-invoicing and the e-invoicing world of tomorrow is about a standard set of data that when you're sending me an invoice, whatever software you use will generate that invoice using a standard data fields. It'll come into my software and my software will interpret those standard data fields. We're getting into interoperability. Now, that's a word I didn't know until I started in this e-invoicing digital business council world. But interoperability means the MYBs interoperating with Xeros. It means Reckons interoperating with MYB using a common standard. So we get an efficient world. My business process, I will still generate an invoice, and my software will create a standard invoice to send digital invoicing across the network. You as my client will receive my invoice via data, and your software will interpret that data and receive it into your system so that you can process it. If I look at the Digital Business Council's way to talk about the framework, they talk about the supplier using the access point, and access points typically will be your software. Your software has to know where to send the invoice. So it will look at what is called a digital capability locator. That DCL tells your software where you are in the digital world. So the digital capability locator says, I know what the address is. It'll refer to the capability publisher that says, what sort of invoice am I allowed to send? What sort of invoice will you receive? What fields will you receive? When my software has worked out where you are, and what sort of invoice you can receive, it sends the invoice across. Your software or your access point decrypts that invoice and puts it into your natural system. So e-invoicing in a world, in a phrase, is an enhanced electronic interaction of invoices. In my world of the bookkeepers and advanced bookkeepers, we are getting very used to the OCR reading of an invoice. So it doesn't matter what format of invoice you send to me, I'm going to scan that invoice in, I'm going to scan the receipt, maybe I'll photograph the receipt on my phone, and the software I'm using will scan the receipt itself, pull out all the important bits of data, turn it into a data feed, and send it into my software. In an e-invoicing world, you won't send me a piece of paper, you won't send me a PDF, you'll send me an electronic invoice, a standard format. It's going to be far more efficient to come into my software. Some of the research that's been done around e-invoicing is that it's 60 to 80% more efficient if an invoice is sent by data. Your system creates the right sort of data. We have this Digital Business Council interoperability standard set of e-invoicing, sending a standard set of data to my software, and my software reads it and processes it into accounts payable. So what that research has said is buyers will be able to trade with a wider and more competitive supplier network. Businesses will have the potential to electronically discover more trading partners as part of the e-invoicing world. I'm not so convinced that that is the commercial reason that I'm interested in e-invoicing. I'm interested in that first line. E-invoicing is 60 to 80% more efficient than processing bits of paper. And what the software suppliers are telling me already, as they create electronic invoices and as they create electronic payment gateways on the back of it, is that invoices are getting paid substantially quicker. They can prove from their data trail that whereas a paper invoice is typically in the 45 to 60 days range, an electronic invoice is down to 14 days in some cases. So I'm looking for efficient business process. That electronic invoice comes into my software. I approve that it is a valid invoice. It now is in my accounts payable. I'm now looking for my software to give me really efficient paying mechanisms as well. So the Digital Business Council have also talked about, I think I talked about this before, the e-invoicing interoperability standard didn't accidentally happen. It isn't one person's idea. The ATO involvement, both fortunately and unfortunately, we've had 3 deputy commissioners own this project over the period of time. Funnily enough, when you have a change of deputy commissioner, it slows the process down, and I'll comment on that again in a moment. But the e-invoicing framework that we have before us, the standards on the table, the design of the digital capability locator that we have on the table, it wasn't an accident. Robin's been involved in it, Link4's been involved in it, I've been involved in it. There's at least 45 members, and it's far more than that, that have been involved in these working groups so that both government, technology suppliers, and business users have all had input into the way the future of e-invoicing looks. The ATO have been providing research and support behind the development of this framework. If you were to look to get very, very involved in where we're at and what's happening, there's a whole lot of published products that describe the standard set and the interoperability framework. So those products are all available on the DBC website. Typically for business users, for bookkeepers, for accountants, you don't need to read this stuff. This really is for the technology implementers who are going to, if you like, solve this problem for us. And we as accountants, as bookkeepers, as business users, we'll go to our software, and our software's how to do e-invoicing guides. What the Digital Council have done is set up those policies, standards and guidelines for how the software will interact with each other. It sets up how two parties will talk to each other, and it has been set up so potentially it will expand to international transactions as well. Just a sample shot of who's been involved in this. This is a list of what was called provisionally accredited providers, so those that were first in the discussions. And this particular slide was taken from a presentation from about a year ago, so there are now more accredited providers. This next slide talks about early adoption. Where are we at today? Well, where we're at today is we have the standards, we have the system, we have a description of the framework, but what we don't have is a key piece of technology, being the digital capability locator. The thing that tells your software where to send the electronic invoice. That has been designed, it has been spec'd, and it has been put out to tender for somebody to build that. And that's a little bit of a stumbling block at the moment of getting somebody to actually build it. And there's a few different discussions going on around that at the moment. But while we've got this temporary hold in place around the capability locator, what we have is people implementing the e-invoicing standard, implementing the creation of invoices according to the standard, creation of invoices according to the standard set. You've got organisations such as Link4 that are adopting the standards, adopting the concepts, and enabling electronic invoicing to happen between businesses. There are lots of proof of concepts in place. There are federal government agencies, there are state government agencies, there are businesses, there are some very big businesses that are using the e-invoicing standard, the e-invoicing concept, but what they're doing is nearly one-to-one organisations, one-to-one interchange of invoices. What we're needing is this DCL so that it can be one organisation sending out to thousands of businesses and one business receiving their invoices from potentially thousands of suppliers. So we have a framework, it's described, it's designed, people are testing it in pretty much one-to-one situations while we get this capability located down. Now, I found this next slide to be quite interesting, and you notice I've left the date right up the top. In fact, I've highlighted the date that this was the conclusion of where e-invoicing was in November 2016. And I'm going to make some comment, partly of which is criticism of what's going on at the moment, part of which is just what I'm hoping that the world will see and benefit from shortly. So my conclusions about the work the Digital Business Council did and all the members of the working groups have done, my conclusion around what government have enabled through the work of the Tax Office is we did develop a collaborative approach. Government, business, associations, software suppliers, all working together to work out what is an efficient invoicing system. Government support has been critical to that. They have given us some infrastructure to have those discussions. We have developed an open international standard. It's open, anybody can use it, it'll level the playing field, and it will create efficiencies. And the interoperability framework is not just limited to e-invoicing, but it opens up the whole digital to digital work. This November slide, November last year, spoke about an expected delivery date of March 2017. You may have noticed that has come and gone. And much to my disappointment and the disappointment of others, we've sort of stalled a little bit. I'm tempted to say because government's involved, but I'm tempted to say because it is complex, to how do we build the DCL, how do we own this critical bit of infrastructure, and how do we fund its ongoing maintenance? And that has been a sticking point. Another sticking point around e-invoicing is, as you've gathered, we all receive spam invoices now. we need an accreditation model, a governance model around e-invoicing. Something that says you are allowed to play, you're allowed to send electronic invoices, or a governance model that says, hang on, that particular business is spamming everybody. It's sending out fake invoices. Kick them off the network and don't let them send any more invoicing. That requires some governance, it requires some accreditation, it requires some authentication, and that has been a bit of a stumbling block at the moment as well. I do expect they will be overcome very, very shortly by fair means or foul. I'm kicking some, what word will I use? Kicking some doors, kicking some bricks to try and say, well, government, if it's too hard for you, let me go back to the commercial environment, and the Digital Business Council will reopen the collaborative approach and get a commercial answer. So e-invoicing's here. What does it mean for business? Well, for business, what e-invoicing does is it brings us, and let me go back to a model, hopefully explains. What it does for business is it brings us an efficient way to send invoices and an efficient way to receive invoices. I'm looking for that invoice to be received into either a gateway product or into my accounting product. Let me approve that that invoice is valid and to be received by me and to eventually be paid by me. And then when it's in my ledger, I can then deal with the payment side. I'm looking for that efficient business process. For bookkeepers, if we go back 5, 10 years, that one of the key roles of bookkeeping was creating data. We would get the bits of paper, we would generate an invoice out of it, whether it's an invoice book or whether it was a Word invoice or whether it was an accounting package driven invoice, and we would send it out. But there was a whole lot of manual process in place. When we received invoices from our suppliers, there was a whole lot of manual process in place where we would receive that bit of paper. There was no scanning software. There was no optical character recognition. We had to key it into our software. We're in a better world today. Already, bits of paper can be turned into data. If we have this e-invoicing world in place, that's going to be far more efficient. There's going to be far more standard sets of data coming into our software. So what I'm looking for the bookkeeper is your world's going to change a little bit. You won't be doing so much data creation, but notice I've talked about the invoice will still come in. It still has to be approved. You will still have to map where you want that invoice coded in your chart of accounts. You'll still have to check what the GST coding will be. Even in a simpler BAS world, we still have to code the GST. But as bookkeepers, and if you like, the accountants who do some verification work, what it means for us is instead of us spending time creating data, we'll get to spend more time verifying the data and using that data in a better way, providing better certainty to the business. So what does it mean for us? A better digital world, less keystrokes, less keystroke errors, and more analysing what's come in, verifying it, authorising it for payment, and using electronic gateways to both receive the invoice and make the payment out. So on the back of that, Robin, I've given a bit of a dose of what I think and anticipate I was meant to be talking about.
You did good.
Feel free to ask me any questions, Robin, if I've missed a point that you'd like me to elaborate on.
Thank you very much. And questions that are coming to your minds as well for the listeners, feel free to ask them online there. So also on that slide there, you've got a number of those, I guess, vendors, software vendors that our listeners may be using. Sure. Another one actually is Sasu. We some people are using that one as well. That also works.
Absolutely.
So the timing of sending an invoice, say typing it up on say MYOB and sending it through to Sage, I don't think you commented in on how quick that is these days.
if people aren't using a product, and forgive me, Robin, I'm not sure quite which ones of these products you link to and don't link to. I should have checked it out before I
all
started.
of those. We've got all of these covered.
And I'm guessing Sasu as well, which is why
Yes,
you mentioned.
that's true.
I just accidentally picked that up. So if a non-connected MYB was sending an invoice out via paper or via email, so it was a PDF, and say the Sage recipient was receiving that PDF or receiving a bit of paper and processing it, we've seen research that talks about the cost of processing that invoice that you received is upwards of $40 or more for that bit of software. And clearly that takes time. For a smaller business, when do you process your invoices? Maybe once a month. Maybe it sits in the in tray till the bookkeeper comes in. Maybe it's done, very ad hoc and only followed up when your supplier rings up for payment. So there is a whole inefficient process, and it takes time. And as I said, upwards of $40 is the price that has been put on the time to process a manual invoice. In an e-invoicing world, I see already solutions like the Link4 product, like some other OCR products that are out there, rapidly improving the time it takes to get an invoice in your system. So we go down from bits of paper sitting in trays to an electronic invoice sitting in a processed inbox waiting to be accepted. And that's far more efficient. So that's not a $40 cost of actually processing. It's a 5-minute job of reviewing the PDF, reviewing, hopefully on screen, reviewing the data that's about to come into my system and hitting accept. So that timing rapidly improves in the processing. And as I spoke about earlier, the evidence from some of the software companies is once that invoice is in your system, it tends to get paid a lot quicker.
Yeah, very good. So actually, just for those of you who don't know me, I'm Robin Sands, CEO of Link4. And thank you for mentioning that what Link4 is connected to there, Matthew. Just on the back of those prices and that you mentioned, just Link4 is specifically around doing this for small business. So we've tried to make it as simple as possible. And so there's no difference, there's no change in what you use with your current software. But also we have a freemium model, so there's no cost. So anyone listening now who's not using Link4, because I know a number of listeners already are, if you're not, you can sign up and try out eInvoicing today, but there is no costs on that at this point. So it's freemium, so there is additional, premium features that you can pay for. And once you're getting a significant amount of invoices being sent on the system, there are costs to do that. But you can try it out now without having to pay anything. Does that answer your question, Fiona? So
I saw a couple of chats and a question come through, Robin.
Yes.
The cost of software connecting into this dream world e-invoicing with the DCL in place and the digital capability locator and the digital capability publisher and access point to access point, the full framework being in place, it has been built on open standards and open information. So any software that is wanting to deliver invoices in per the standard into the operating framework, the dream would be there would be no cost. Now, I keep saying the dream world because personally, I think government should have a responsibility to deliver the capacity for an interoperability framework for e-invoicing. It feels to me like it's an economy benefit. And my world, my dream world, is government is about delivering benefits to the economy. Don't howl me down after I've said that out loud. But that's my dream world. So to me, the cost of this infrastructure should be funded by government. I've talked a little bit about my concerns about the delay it's taken to get this final hurdle covered. And it may end up being that the interoperability framework for e-invoicing has to be enabled by a commercial outcome. And where we've talked about some fairly low cost but per business that's inside the framework. So would there be a cost of being involved? Absolutely, because somebody has to maintain this central bit of infrastructure. Personally, I'm hoping government comes to the party.
You can hope.
A question was asked.
Yes, there is a question there. Do you want to answer that one? Would you like me to summarise the question for you?
Thanks, Robin.
Yep, so the question is relating to an ATO requirement for maintaining a copy of the invoice from an audit perspective. So do we have to resort to buyer suppliers maintaining the invoice from a structured data, or is ATO considering any changes to invoicing requirements for supporting e-invoicing?
So I'm going to answer it in two ways. Today's world certainly allows you, via ATO law, to retain an electronic copy of the invoice. Now, typically, our interpretation of that today has been an electronic copy of the PDF, or we go and scan it and create a scanned image and we file that away somewhere. As some of you will be aware, our commercial software is improving in the way it will retain an electronic copy of an invoice and attach it even to the transaction. So you might be going through your general ledger for an expense, you see something you don't quite understand, you can drill on the transaction and actually open up the invoice that generated that transaction. I like where the software is going in that framework. And all of that is permissible to the ATO. The second half of my answer is, if we end up in a total e-invoicing world where the only thing my system is receiving is data entered into a standard set of data fields, I have no PDF. But what my software will do is take all those bits of data and render it or put it into a facsimile of an invoice or represent the invoice in a certain way. We are looking for the ATO to accept that the submission of data and the fact that my system has received that data, that is still receipt of an invoice. And because I will be able to prove who it came from and prove that I paid it and give them a facsimile or a representation of what the invoice would look like, the ATO, will be able to accept it. And we've had no pushback from the ATO in our discussions to date. One of the methods that e-invoicing is looking to be implemented is, although your system will send me the data fields, attached to the message might be a PDF copy as well. So some of the invoice is saying, send me the data, but send me a PDF. And on my receiving software, it will put the data straight into the fields, but it will have a PDF replica also attached to the message.
And that's exactly how we do that there, by the way, Matthew. So it does come through and it is maintained. And as BDO actually said, the audit trail is perfect because there is that replica of the PDF, which is saved inside of certain software systems.
And Robin, my business logic head goes, that makes sense. That although you've sent me data and I'm going to get the data represented in my receiving screen, businesses, bookkeepers, accountants who are trying to verify are going to want to see a original invoice still for some time, until we have moved our whole culture to a very different sort of interaction. So I think that passing of the invoice across in PDF still is going to make sense for some time.
And the good thing there too is you don't need to print it out and store a physical copy, which I know people are doing these days, and so you don't need to have boxes of invoices kept in a little shed out the back.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
Additional questions from anyone at this point?
There's a couple on chat, Robin, that I'm just struggling to get to.
Okay, have a quick look at that, and you just while you're doing that, letting people know that obviously we're talking about Link4 doing things today. So as much as the government may have slowed down, there is a business need for this, which is why we've pushed ahead and have created it. And there are several people using the system today, including some online now.
So some of those questions on chat, what will happen to businesses that are providing electronic facility now? It's a great question, because those of us that are very familiar with OCR, there's a large number of suppliers now. The hub docs, the receipt banks, we used to have InvitBox, that's now inside the Intuit product. There's a large number of providers. We've also got, MIB doing its own version, Xero doing its own version, Reckon doing its own version. As I said, Intuit had it inside. So we've still got multiple products out there. If the e-invoicing interoperability standard becomes the standard across the digital economy for Australia, I see each of those products simply changing a little bit of their business case. Instead of their business case being primarily, we will OCR receive your invoice and turn it into data, well, they will just receive the data in the first instance. They will still give you then the interaction with your software to send the data into your mapped codes. So I do still see a business case for those third-party products such as Link4 going on. I still see very much a business case adding efficient business processes in. And clearly it's going to be a journey of time for the whole Australian economy to accept the e-invoicing world. Do we have to register per customer or per practice? Good question. We'll have to see how each of the software companies actually roll out the e-invoicing world. Restaurants need line items to use for costing and defining numbers to get items. This would need to be considered. So absolutely. One of the things that was designed as we looked at the e-invoicing world was a standard set of invoices, but also recognised that some industries need tailored invoices or they need more detail of a particular type. So while there be a standard set, there will also be a set of invoices with extensions. And what I mean by extensions is like the restaurant industry that might need some more information on it. But the invoicing standard allows line-by-line invoicing, not just an invoice with a total. It allows all that item dissection, including quantities, volumes, item numbers, suppliers' item numbers, customer item numbers, GST or no GST. All of this is brought into the interoperability framework and the standard set of data. E-invoicing is happening around the world. The information I have is Australia has leapfrogged some of the other information, some of the other progress around the world, just to the way the Digital Business Council was able to develop the standard quite quickly. But it is happening elsewhere, and the Australian standard has been built in a manner that we can interact with the offshore or international suppliers or customers as well. So, yeah, absolutely, the international is looked at. Robin.
Yes. So just mentioning there too, Michelle, line items do come through with Link4. And one reason for that is because we specifically met with restaurants to be able to do that initially, because that is something they requested. And we do have, and I guess this relates to Mohammed's question there, that we have a bookkeeper and accountant's login section within Link4, because you may want to be managing several accounts on behalf of your customers, and you can do that through a portal. And as far as international activity, we are actually receiving interest from overseas fairly frequently at the moment, particularly from the UK. There's a lot of e-invoicing happening in the UK right now, but the tools available to small business are a bit sparse, and so the UK government actually are assisting us in setting up an office, and current plans have us opening an office in London in April to help meet the needs over there. Now, there are additional questions.
So one other question that's come through, Robin, I see on the Q&A. How do we position e-invoicing, considering so much investment in OCR optimization and supplier onboarding? I suppose my positive view is the OCR developments that we're all benefiting from now, and the suppliers of OCR have been part of the journey to the most efficient e-invoicing framework. So I don't see us needing to throw out the OCR world or throw out the business processes that we are using with OCR software. I see that we develop those business processes into using software that receives a e-invoice according to the interoperability framework. I see it as part of the journey coming through. I'm not feeling like there's huge investment going out. One of the things that I alluded to earlier was that there are lots of silos of e-invoicing going on. If I was a supplier supplying to both Coles and Woolworths, I've got to send out my invoices in two different formats, one that Coles accepts and ones that Woolworths accept. They are two different silos about the e-invoicing world. What this interoperability framework does is put both Coles and Woolworths on the same playing field, if you like, that their systems will interact with a sending invoice the same way. They might interpret it differently. They might want to put the data in different places according to their system. But instead of us having Coles' system and Woolworths systems and Bunnings' system and whomever else's, we'll have one standard that is nationally approved. And all of the big players are saying they see this as a huge benefit. So
yes.
I'm positions that a little bit.
Right. Now, there is a question like, do both sides, the sender and receiver, need to have e-invoicing enabled? And I guess this comes back to the security side of it, of like, you can't just send an invoice to someone if they don't want it. So they do need to be able to log on and be a part of the e-invoicing network.
Yeah, and that's the accreditation and authorisation I talked about, and it's not a simple question. I wish it was. Unfortunately, we do have some interesting people in this world who like to send out, how will I word it, interesting invoices, requiring payments for things that we don't quite know that we ordered. So yes, both the sender and receiver would need to be in the system. As per the slide on screen at the moment, these access points will have a key role in knowing the customer, and what we're looking to do is this access point will need to be accredited and authorised to act in the system. So they will have a role in making sure their customers are only sending legitimate invoices through.
And as far as that's...
Sorry, Robin. Go on.
I was just going to refer to that slide. Link4 is an access point with regards to that, so that if anyone's thinking I need to, drop my MYOB and use Link4 instead, that's not the case. We're the access point, so we link those systems together. So you use your current accounting system.
Marie's asked about the sender and receiver of the invoice would both need to have e-invoicing enabled. And Marie, that's another reason I see that the OCR world doesn't go away very quickly, that these third-party providers, be it the receipt banks or the hub docs or MYB smart bills or Xero's invoicing process and procedure, I don't see them going away at all. I just see them adopting that they will receive the data and that we will all find it more efficient to receive and send the data using the e-invoicing interoperability framework. So it'll be a journey of more and more senders of invoices sending their data in. And what I see is that there's going to be third-party products that it doesn't matter how you send the invoice, third-party software is going to turn that invoice into a set of data and send it out. Hence what I think part of what Robin does. Or on the other end, products will sit there and receive an invoice via the e-invoicing standard or via other versions, and they'll still send it into data that your MYBs or Xeros or Reckons will receive according to the interoperability framework standard set of data. So I see it as a logical progression of the journey we've been on to make invoicing digital.
So we do have another question here. I'll ask that one, and then we'll make this the last one, and then we can continue on. So are we limiting to just e-invoicing, or is DBC aiming to leverage e-invoicing channel to exchange purchase orders, remittances, to enable a digital procure to pay?
The quick answer is yes, and the long answer is yes. Absolutely, they are in scope. We simply haven't gone to purchase orders and quotes, and even there's discussions around the whole cataloguing and offer of the digital catalogue type thing. Now, digital cataloguing just opens up cans of worms for me, but purchase orders and quotes and receipts and return dockets and credit notes are all in scope. So absolutely, we see that this e-invoicing framework can leverage into the whole procure to pay cycle.
Yes, very good. And we like as Link4, we do see that as well. It's logical. We get requests for that, and we have started some of those processes already. But the point would be, let's nail down e-invoicing and get that right and accepted first, and that's what we're focused on. And yes, e-invoicing will continue on even with the new payments platform. Very good. So as mentioned, we do have e-invoicing active today for small business. We are interacting with some government agencies and some large enterprises as well. So feel free to sign up for a free account for Link4 online. We're very happy to help you with any other questions or comments that you may have. So feel free to email either ourselves or Matthew, and we can follow up on that. Matthew, did you have any final comments yourself?
Look, thanks, Robin. Digital Business Council has been a forum, a collaborative forum of people who want to improve the digital economy. Institute of Certified Bookkeepers, which I'm the Executive Director of. We represent the bookkeeping community. Our community is very keen to improve the way business does business, and we've seen e-invoicing forever as a really logical step forward. So for yourself and for your community, Robin, please know that you can get in touch with us. We have a community of bookkeepers who are educated and knowing about the e-invoicing world, and quite happy to take businesses on this journey with them. So, Robin, on behalf of our community, thanks for playing and thanks for the invite to be involved today.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Really appreciate your insights. And there's more questions than that coming through. We'll follow up with you after the webinar. So once again, thanks everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate that. Goodbye.